Hi, we are Caroline and Levi Holt, and we're part of the family here at Holt Farms.
When I think of the people that I know that I watched wear Liberty overalls growing up, hard work, determination, perseverance, just a real appreciation for their craft and what they did and for things that lasted and for things that meant something to them. That's what I saw walking around in Liberty overalls.
Shop libertybibs.com for your pair today.
Hi, I'm Caitlin Dubin, and this is the Rural Woman Podcast. I'm a first-generation farmer who married into agriculture. Born and raised in a city, I was so unfamiliar with where my food came from, but I was determined to figure it out. Through my journey into agriculture, I saw women who were strong but humble, often taking a back seat. To me, these women were leaders who deserved a seat at the table. I created the Rural Woman Podcast to share the voices of women in an industry whose stories often went untold. The rural entrepreneurs who live and breathe their work, full of grit and pride. We come here to share our stories, to be in community with each other, to be challenged and inspired, but most importantly, to be celebrated and to be heard. We may not all live, farm, ranch, or homestead the same, but we are all connected. We are rural women, and our stories are worthy of being told. Hey everyone, welcome to this week's episode of the Rural Woman Podcast. We are continuing with our Positively Farming Media member highlights, and this week we are featuring the Barnyard Language podcast, hosted by Caite Palmer and Arlene Hunter. The Barnyard Language podcast is real talk about running farms and raising families. Whether you farm in raised beds in your backyard or 10,000 acres, or whether your family is in the planning stages or you've got 12 kids. This podcast is just honest talk from two mamas who know what it's like when everyone is telling you to just get all of your meals delivered and do all of your shopping online, but your internet is too slow and you've got cows to feed. I'm sure there are many of you that can relate to that. I know I sure can. On this episode that we are featuring, it is an interview that Caite and Arlene hosted with Jane Paul of Children's Resources on Wheels. Jane is a child development specialist and a Canadian farmer. Before we get to this week's episode, I just want to say a quick hello and thank you to our newest patron, Beverly C., over on Patreon. Thank you so much for your financial support of the Rural Woman Podcast. I truly could not do this show without you and all of the other wonderful patrons of the Rural Woman Podcast. So thank you very much. Without further ado, my friends, let's get to this week's special Positively Farming Media member episode with the Barnyard Language Podcast.
Welcome to Barnyard Language. We are Caite and Arlene, an Iowa sheep farmer and an Ontario dairy farmer, with 6 kids, 2 husbands, and a whole lot of chaos between us. So kick off your boots, reheat your coffee, and join us for some Barnyard Language. Honest talk about running farms and raising families.
In case your kids haven't already learned all the swears from being in the barn, it might be a good idea to put on some headphones or turn down the volume. While many of our guests are professionals, they aren't your professionals. If you need personalized advice, consult your people. Welcome, everyone, to episode 4 of Barnyard Language. Thank you for coming back and for listening to our podcast. Caite, what's happening on the farm these days?
Well, right now, to be perfectly honest, Arlene, our vet is here castrating some calves that are really too big to be castrated, and fly pouring cows, and probably cursing my name because there was a bit of a snafu with scheduling, and the vet thought I was going to be out there helping, and I'm in here recording instead. there was a suggestion that I could just bring, my whole recording setup out to the barn and just work cattle while recording to really get.
Sure, we might need an even more explicit swear warning at the beginning of the episode.
There's generally nothing but swears. So I'm guessing especially that trying to record while working cattle would not really give us the best sound quality. Other than that, just getting ready to send the kiddos back to school and not much else. How about you, Arlene?
Well, at the time that we're recording, this is the day after our Holstein show. So we had a good day yesterday. We had a good crew of young people that my husband was very happy to delegate to. He has had some really good luck with former 4-H members, and now we have a 15-year-old who's very excited about showing cows. So we had a good young crew of workers, and he even slept at home during the night and then went back in the morning and didn't stay up all night with the cows. So that feels like big progress for us. And then this morning, of course, I was scrubbing manure out of white clothes. So that goes along with showing dairy animals.
I actually came in from helping get set up to work cattle and realized that even as careful as I had been, I still ended up using baby wipes to scrub cow shit out of my pants before I came to record, just because the smell gets a little much when you're just sitting in your office.
Sure, yeah.
So Arlene, before we move on, what tips and tricks for stain removal do you have? Because I mean, if you can get cow shit out of white pants, you're doing something right for sure.
Well, I kind of just throw everything at it. I've got one of those, like the bar of soap that, you stain treat before. I use the white setting on my washing machine. I have the OxyClean white stuff, and I throw in the bleach. So far it hasn't, put a toxic smell into the house. We haven't had any reactions that cause any bad effects. And, if it doesn't come out in the first run, I'll throw it all back in and do it 2 or 3 more times, and then putting everything out on the line as well. And I've also found that, they're just going to be wearing them for another show. So if there are a few stains left on them, then they just kind of blend into all the rest. Just get the big stuff out.
Yeah. I know I'm in a cleaning group, and there's, about this time of year, there's all these moms whose kids are playing baseball in places that have red clay soil. And they always wear white pants. I'm like, obviously nobody asked the moms what color pants these kids should be wearing, because I know they would not be choosing white.
I feel the same way about whoever chose white for showing dairy animal.
Yeah, it's thumbs down.
So our guest today is Jane Paul, and Jane is from near me. She lives in Lanark County in Eastern Ontario, and she spent her career working with young children and their families. She works for an organization that's close to my heart called Children's Resources on Wheels, and their mission is to support and strengthen childcare, family life, child development, and community links in Lanark County. She worked for many years as a playgroup facilitator with Crow, and her current position is the parent education coordinator. So the question that we ask each of our guests, Jane, is what are you growing? So Jane, what are you growing?
So full disclosure here, I am a bit at arm's length. I still live on the farm, but we are succeeding the farm to the next generation. So I will tell you about what we were growing and what we did as when I was in the midst of it all here. So we have a cow-calf operation on this farm, raising beef cow to feeder weight, and then sent them off. Of course, along with that, we grow hay and some cash crop in there. We have a small sawmill that we built our houses from as well. So we log our own stuff in the wintertime and bring it in, saw it up, and that has built our houses here. And to keep it all going, because you need something bringing the money in on a regular basis, is the maple syrup. So we not only made maple syrup, but we sold the equipment and the evaporators and the can. We had a can company, as well as all the maple products as well. So true Ontario farm, a little bit of everything in there. And at the same time, when I came on board here, because I'm a transplant, we went from the farm just supporting one family, which was my father-in-law and mother-in-law and their kids, to supporting 3 families. So while we were all involved in the farming as well, the women all worked off on a second job to provide enough money so that everybody could actually farm and we could raise our kids in the country.
How many kids do you
So
have,
I have
Jane?
3, and my 3 are grown now. They're still in the area, and they go from 30 something, 36, I guess, down to 28. And 2 of them have just been recently married in the last couple of summers here on the farm. So that was a lot of fun. And hay bale seeding and everything out in the hay fields. And one of them is a little old McDonald's farm herself. And they have a little bit of everything on their small little hobby farm as well. It's just that love of the world, right? Of things growing and of things being healthy and just being a part of something that's bigger than ourselves too.
So today we're talking about the idea of resiliency. Jane, can you tell us what resiliency means to you?
Sure. So, I mean, in my other job, in my other life off the farm, where I have to go once in a while, although during the pandemic, we got to do it all from home here. So that's been a nice treat for us. But I am a parent education coordinator, like Arlene said, and she happens to sit on our board and has for many years. So I do a lot of education for families with young children on just how to cope day to day. And so when you guys were talking about doing this and talking about resiliency, I thought, boy, those are 2 things that really fit together, farming and resiliency. So for me, resiliency is all about, the program that we run for parents to come and join is called Bounce Back and Thrive. And that's resiliency in a nutshell, right? Life throws you curves, it throws you things that you never imagined on the farm. And if you can bounce back from them and continue to thrive, then you're resilient. So, I mean, it's all about the fact that there are certain skills people have, and they are skills. They're not things we're necessarily born with, but they're skills that we can learn to help us be more resilient, to help us bounce back when life throws us curves. So to me, that's really what resiliency is all about.
Like you said, farming provides lots of opportunities to be resilient, but what are some of the things that we can actually do as adults when we aren't feeling very resilient or we don't know how to bounce back from those adversities?
So I think the first thing is we model it, right? We model it for our kids and for the people around us. And in order to be resilient, one of the first things we have to do is we have to look at our own strengths. We have to look at what we bring to the table. And you ladies, I'm sure, I mean, you're talking about multitasking today there, Caite, and it's just, so many things that are on your plate all the time. So that's a big part of it, is just knowing that you can do that. Because in my world, I'm all about reducing stress, right? Everything comes down to stress and the relationship between you and the things around you, whether those things are people, whether those things are, whether it's nature, whether it's the farm, your environment. It's about you and how you relate to all of those things. So when you know your own strengths, when you know that you can get up in the morning and, like you said, the vet shows up and you say, it's okay, I got this, I can manage this. That keeps that stress down and keeps us coping. And I mean, farm life is nothing but that every morning. I jokingly, when Arlene asked about, things I wanted to talk about, said, I really want to talk about those times when they come in and say, you know what, it's just a 15-minute job. I'll be back in 3 days or maybe even 3 weeks later. We're still working on this, right? So it's knowing that you can roll with the punches, right? Knowing that you have the strength and the capability to take over what you need to take over, when you need to take over, whether it's jumping in because, somebody else was supposed to be picking up the kids and you've got to go and do that. Somebody else was supposed to be, helping with the meals because I'm working, a 14-hour day today in my other job, and being able to get all those things to happen. So I think that very first part about resilient people is knowing your own strengths and being your own cheerer in the background. Right? I mean, we've just had the Olympics. Just as we would cheer on our hometown Olympians out here, we're going to cheer on ourselves to be more resilient in there. I guess the other big piece for me is when we recognize those pressures, recognizing that a lot of those pressures come from inside us. And those are the ones that we get to change, right? I mean, the fact that you said to the vet, no, this is the way it's got to be. This is you're putting what you're doing on the line out there, and you're saying this is the way it's going to be. That's all from inside you. There are also a lot of pressures that come from outside, right? And those are things we don't get to control. So being able to differentiate between the two of those and knowing when you've got to let one go because you have no control over it, and going back to those things, that the pressures that we're putting on ourselves as we're wearing all these different hats here, right? Delivering calves, dealing with the horses, being a wife, being a mother, being the advocate at the school when your child's not doing well, all of those things that we have to do, recognizing what you've got control over in those situations and what you don't. And so you're not wasting your time and energy and stressing yourself out about things that you don't have control over. So that leads me to the whole core part of resiliency. And that's the connection between our thoughts and our actions. And so how we think about things, how we perceive them, and it doesn't matter if it's really grounded in reality or not at the beginning, it's what we perceive to be the reality, right? So we teach a lot about going back to catching the feelings that we have. If you're really angry or you have an intense feeling about a certain situation, pay attention to that, because it's your body telling you something's going on here. So if you're really angry and you catch that emotion, you've got to backtrack and say, okay, hang on, take a breath, slow down, go back. What was I telling myself? What was I thinking in my head about this? Can I reframe that? Can I change how I was thinking about it so that I then evoke a different emotion? My body has different signals because it's now a different emotion, and I can change what's going to happen just by changing how I'm thinking about it. And that is huge, huge in the resiliency game, right? I mean, this morning I headed out to turn out horses bright and early. It's a hot day here. We got to get them out early onto the pasture, and so because they're going to spend most of the day back in here in the cool when it's too hot this afternoon. We're heading up, I think the humidex is about 40 degrees in our area today. So as I headed out there, and I'm grabbing fly masks because the bugs have just been horrific out here in the last few days, and I throw one on a new horse that we have, it doesn't fit. And I'm going, why didn't I remember that her head was smaller than the one that we had to put down last fall, right? Like, what am I going to do now? They were really in agony yesterday. They need a fly mask on there. So, and then I say to myself, hang on, don't get bent out of shape about this. You're frustrated. What do you get to do? I don't get to do a whole lot. There's nothing else. I can either send her out without a fly mask. She was that way last week. She'll survive. Or I can, jury rig this one so it fits a little better. So I stop, I breathe and say, hang on, you're frustrated and you're angry and you're ticked off at yourself that you didn't, prepare for this. But and then I say, hang on, is that going to help? That's not going to help. Okay, what helps? Okay, you're doing your best. You've got other things on the go today. What have you got control of? Let's just make it fit best as we can. And out they went. So I've gone from being frustrated, being ticked off at myself, horses reacting to that environment, right? And now prancing all over the place as I'm trying to get them out through a gate, to hang on, slow down, settle yourself. Now I'm a little bit, I'm in problem solving mode. So I'm using a different part of my brain. So that wild part is settling down again. The horses are now saying, oh, okay, it's okay. She settled herself down. I don't need to be afraid, right? Everything's calmer out there. Fixed the situation, sent them on, came in to me, read my notes for for our podcast. So it's really about catching that emotion, going back and saying, what was I thinking? How else can I think about this for a better outcome? And then that changes everything. Your body isn't as tense, your body settles down. My action goes from, wanting to pound a horse who's not settled here and letting me do what I need to do, to being gentle, being kind, solving the problem, and getting on with life. And so that's a huge part of resiliency. What we're thinking inside our head comes from all the different things that we have grown up through, from the parenting that has been modeled for us and the people around us, from the experiences that we've had as we've gone along, right? And our health and everything else. It makes that internal dialogue. And I think that's one place where we are so lucky, because being a part of a farming life, right? Nothing ever goes smoothly. It's something you have to look at, and you have to learn to bend with the wind, right? And be in problem solving mode a lot of the time without getting bent out of shape. And I think those are skills that we can pass on to our kids as well, as long as we realize that they are skills. It's not something magical some people have and some don't. They are things that we can actually learn if we see them as a skill and practice them. So there you go. You just got a 6-week course in resiliency in 5 minutes.
There you go. One thing that's really been life-changing for me is realizing how common it is for anxiety to manifest as anger, and really pushing myself now when I snap at my kids to stop and explain to them what's going on and to apologize and to model being a functional grown-up, I guess. And before anybody thinks that I'm just like super zen, we're talking about a lot of therapy and a lot of anxiety medication. But just realizing how much fear can manifest as anger, and explaining to my kids that, sometimes mommy gets scared and it makes mommy angry because she wants you to be safe. This is why I seem angry, and how much that's deepened my relationship with my kids. And Jane, my kids are 4 and 3, so we're very much at the irrational anger.
You nailed it.
All
though.
fronts.
Anger is one
stage of things.
You nailed it though, because anger is something we call a secondary emotion. You have to have something else happen first that moves you to anger, right? And so when you talk about anxiety or you talk about fear, that's it exactly. And you've got that monologue going in your head that's upping the anxiety and upping the fear, and then that leads you to that anger. And I think when you look at farm families too, we have so many responsibilities, we have so many things on our shoulders that these things weigh really, really heavily, and we have a lot of anxiety about so many things, because again, there's so many things we don't get to control, and we work so hard and we have high expectations to be caring for not only our kids, but also the animals and the farm and our lifestyle and everything, that it's huge. And I think there's a big part of genetics in this too. So if you've married into a farm family and you're from a farm family, wow, double banger here, eh?
Yeah, the other one that's really helped us is my husband and I went to a retreat where we talked about our priorities for our family and really narrowing down what the absolute top priority is. And for us, it was to keep our family together and close and healthy. And the second priority was to keep the farm land in the family, and everything else is after that. And that has really helped us, I think, to not have everything else be the highest priority as it comes up, to be able to remember that the very highest priority is to not hate each other, because I know so many farm families that have just disintegrated, and it's, what's the point of having a family farm if there's no family?
Yeah, and good for you for getting on the same page, because I think that's something.
It's hard to remember, for sure.
But I think you're right. That's certainly one of the problems, the forefront problems of the farm. From somebody who came in from outside a farm family, I have to grieve that life that I thought the family farm was going to be, right? It's not. How great is it to have your partner at home and around here? Well, we never saw him, right? He was always out and gone. So grieving that life that I thought, that fantasy life that was there, and allowing yourself to grieve, allowing yourself to feel that loss. But like you said, coming back to reality, showing gratitude for what you do have and for what's important, right? Finding that positive part of it and moving forward with it. Like, wow, I bow down to you. You are my guru.
Definitely, I worry a lot that people think that I'm have any idea what the hell I'm doing, because I really don't. It's a lot of practice, and it's a lot of medication, to be perfectly honest. But just doing what we can to go day by day. And I know there is a lot of grief towards, my husband and I both work non-farm jobs, and we farm, and our kids are in daycare, and this isn't what I pictured.
Right.
But it's what we got. So,
well, it's funny you talk about medication and anxiety, because first of all, I'm adopted. So I don't have that background in medical history for myself, but I probably fall in there. But my husband's family, that anxiety and medication runs down through generations and generations. So, you're in good company there, woman.
Well, and I think looking at both sides of our family, I feel like the more open that we can be about getting the help we need, looking at what it has done to past generations to not have that access and that openness about help they needed, and what that's done to their families, to them, to their kids, is just...
So when
the best thing I can do for my kids is ask for help.
When people talk about resiliency, that is usually the first resiliency skill they talk about. The ability to reach out for help and reinforcements when you need it. And that is the first resiliency skill that they look at when they look at why people are resilient. Those who can speak up and reach out and ask for help are more resilient.
Well, and I know for myself, there's probably a lot of people who are horrified by how open I am about things in my life. I know there are people who are horrified by it. But I also know that so many people have come to me and thanked me for being open about it, because the more normal it becomes to be open about things, the easier it is for everybody else to be open about it. And it's just remembering, too, that we're not going to get a prize for being the best mom. Nobody's actually inspecting to see if you're using paper plates or if you have a house cleaner, or, there's nobody coming to check up to give you a little gold star for,
exactly.
And those things that you mentioned, Caite, it's funny because you talk about being the best mom, and yet both of those examples don't have anything to do with parenting. That has to do with the feelings that we have about what it looks like on the outside to look like you've got it all together and that you're, keeping up. But that's not actually the parenting. The modeling and the connection with our kids is the parenting part. And those other things, like you said, they're not even on your list of priorities, because those things about our homes and, the way we prepare food and all of that, extra stuff it's part of life, but it's not part of the actual parenting role.
Arlene, you just nailed it, because you're exactly right. What makes me a good mom is my kids knowing they're loved and having their basic needs met. And as long as they're fed, it really doesn't matter what plates they're eating off of.
Exactly.
And they have a safe home, they have loving parents, they have a supportive community. And that's what makes it a healthy family or not. Not whether I pay somebody to help clean our house, which I do, because, I finally released some of that guilt about, well, I can do everything. Why can't I do everything? Why don't I have 38 hours in a day instead of 24 like everybody else? I'm special. I should have 38 hours in a day. Turns out I don't. Turns out it's easier to just pay my house cleaner and get some of that time back for stuff that only I can do, stuff that I want to do, stuff that's useful to my family, that's not spending my time mopping floors, which does need to be done because our floors are disgusting. But I don't have to be the one to do it.
That's right. I mean, when we finally got to actually build on the farm and build our house here, the first thing we put in was a bathroom and a shower right inside the back door, right? Thinking, great, we've got a mudroom right here. It's going to make it so much easier. Do you think anybody actually ever goes in there before they tromp to the living room? Nope. But it's there if we need it, right?
My sister's joked before about designing the farmhouse that has a drain in the floor, kind of like you have like in a utility room or in the barn, to just have that in the bathroom and just be able to hose the whole thing down. More of a wet room situation than actually a bathroom.
Actually talking about this at lunch yesterday, Arlene, at my dream house, and it would not be very hygge or pleasing at all aesthetically, would be if the entire house was cement with tile and just had, like the sprayer that comes down off the ceiling with just a floor drain in every room. You just hose the damn thing down. But that's not what matters.
Not many soft furnishings in that option.
Yeah, no, not that's very, right. Not cozy, but clean.
Well, and those are the realities, right? I mean, what we love about farming too. I mean, I'm all about the animals and everything else there. It comes. I mean, you walk into our back bathroom and hanging there are 2 bridles, 3 hard hats, a bareback pad. We actually have 3 syringes up along the window right now. There are no sharps on them, right? But for giving medication to animals that have been ill in the last little bit, it's just, you know what? And they need to be there. I thought about putting them away. No, we actually need those 3 times a day at the moment. So that's where they need to sit. So before I became a parent education coordinator, back in my young years, I helped breed, break, and train standardbreds out west in British Columbia. And on Friday, before we had banking that went straight into the bank, we would all truck in on Friday at lunchtime with our checks to deposit them, with KY jelly in this pocket and a syringe in this pocket and a rectal examination glove hanging out the back. We're quite the crew coming in. And like you said, these things become normal, right? When we talk about it, we just said, oh, yeah, I work on the horse farm. Oh, yeah, you're one of those. Okay. And away we go. But the more we talk about things and the more we live our authentic self and our authentic lives, the more that normalizes things. And, Arlene's right. We tend to compartmentalize things, but you've got to do things in the way that we talked about, looking and recognizing your own strengths. You've got to do things in the way that promote your strengths and fill in the blanks in the other places with those things that you're not getting to with other people. Reaching out, that's one of the great websites if you're looking to learn about resiliency. Reaching in, reaching out. RIRO, RERO. Reaching inside ourselves and then reaching out to others. And that's what resiliency is. So more power to you in the way that you can do it and fits your lifestyle.
And I think that's one of the hardest things about, pandemic life and what we've been going through the last year and a half is those opportunities for reaching out really have been limited. The resources and the people that we used to depend on, you could ask a grandma or a sister or a brother or someone else to, watch the kids or, pick something up for you, or those types of opportunities were restricted so much to our immediate families. And in some ways that brought closeness, and in other ways that has also severed relationships, because while trying to do the right thing for ourselves and our immediate families, that reaching out has become more difficult. And now we're in this in-between space where you don't know what's right. Can I ask that person? Is it okay? How much should we be together? Is that, if it might be right for me, but it's not right for them. All of those types of decisions have just gotten harder.
They have. And I mean, farming is somewhat about isolation already to begin with, for the hours that you keep and the jobs that you have to do. And you have to do things when they need to be done, right? And then the pandemic has just exacerbated all of that. You're absolutely right.
Jane, can you give us some more examples of how we can teach our farm kids to be more resilient as children and as they grow up into hopefully functional
Absolutely.
adults?
I think, we talked about modeling, and you actually mentioned that part of parenting is modeling for your kids. And that's the biggest part of it. Even if you get up in the morning and it's not a great day, fake it till you make it. Put it out there in front of the kids and let them know this is a possibility. And Caite, you talked about making sure that you're speaking up about how you're feeling, allowing that discussion of emotions to happen, being able to talk about how you feel no matter what it is. And we accept all feelings, right? From our kids, we accept all feelings. We limit the behaviors, It's okay to be angry. It's not okay to hit your brother. But we accept all of those feelings so that we can open that up and let those feelings out. So that's a big part of resiliency, and making sure that when we talk about it, that we're giving kids the language that they can talk about it. I love to talk about a time when my middle child, who is a teacher, and she coaches volleyball as well for high school kids. And I walked in to pick her up from one of her places. Her car was getting fixed. And I walked in, and out of her mouth came the language of resiliency. As she's talking to these grade 12 boys, they were putty in her hands because she's there being positive, being assertive, being open. You talk so much about being open and being your real self, Caite. There she is with these young lads talking, acknowledging their feelings, right? Describing the problem, setting the boundaries that go along with that, right? And that's just her first language. It's not my first language. I had to learn it, but because she grew up with it. And Arlene's guys are the same way. They've grown up from the earliest parts knowing that they could talk about how they're feeling. Being able to be angry when they're angry and knowing that that's not going to sever the relationship. So when Arlene you talked about making sure that parenting is about keeping that relationship there between you and your child. That's resiliency as well. We need to show them that no matter what they do, we are going to be there for them. Yes, there are limits and boundaries to your actions, but there is nothing that you can do that's going to sever that relationship. I grew up in an atmosphere. I'm a little older than I look here. The hair hasn't gone gray. Some say that's, being out in nature. Some say it's growing on the farm, and I'm just full of that bullshit, right? And it's kept everything nice and brown. But for our kids, it's really important to know that relationship is first and foremost. And so we deal with things in a positive way. In my culture, we had the leather strap in the closet. Dad came home from sea. We all got soundly whipped, and it got to the point when he walked in the house, we ran. We know better than that now. We know to acknowledge feelings. We know that, we still have to be stronger, bigger, kinder, and have boundaries. And that's what gives kids security. Again, being on the farm, one of the things that the kids get to learn is about failure when things don't go right. And that is a huge part of resiliency and life. We don't become confident and strong from getting it right all the time. We do it from falling flat, from things not going well, getting up, trying again, possibly failing again, trying a third time, and then being successful. So helping them get that can-do attitude and that realization that because something doesn't go well, or that you may not be the number one at it, that's okay, right? We learn a lot more from failure. As long as we keep trying, we learn a lot more from failure than we do from our successes most of the time. Failure just means, we've got a problem here. How do we solve that? So helping kids, not being too quick to jump in to solve their problems, standing beside them and being supportive and encouraging and giving some tips, when needed, but allowing them to try what they think will work and see whether it works or not. That's how they learn risk management, right? That's how they learn, just general problem solving. So I think when kids on the farm have chores that they're responsible for, when, they know that there are rules and regulations about driving the tractor, about, using the four-wheelers, about expectations that we do need your help. What you bring to the table is valuable, right? And as our kids get older, they help out with a lot of the more physical farm chores as well. And knowing that that's important. Yes, you do need to get up in the morning. Yes, you do need to complete those chores. But if you have problems, come and talk to me about it, because then we'll figure it out together, right? Those things all lead to that can-do attitude, recognizing that they do bring things to the table. They do have strengths, physical strengths, mental strengths, emotional strengths, strengths like using humor. Each one of us has the class clown. amongst the family. That can be something that relieves a lot of pressure. That is a strength and a skill they can use to help in the world. Making them aware of the strengths that they do have and commenting on those and, praising them for that. They don't need praise 24/7, right? Sometimes the praise is just thanks. That was a big help, but allowing all of those things to happen, help kids be more resilient. But the biggest one, like both of you mentioned, is model it for them. And if you're going to talk your way through it, if we're having a problem with frustration in our family, and I'm going to literally talk out loud so kids learn my thought process, and I go, oh, I dropped that box. Now there's a mess on the floor. What do I have to do? Oh, I'm so frustrated. Make sure you tell your partner that you're doing this so they don't hit the rocker, right? But talk your way through the process. Oh, I'm frustrated. Okay, hang on. I'm going to take a deep breath. Okay, now I'm calmer. Okay, what needs to be done? I just need to clean up the mess on the floor. Who can help me with that? The dog. Okay, come here, Fido. And he can come and clean up the wet parts and I'll scrape up the other stuff. But it's doing things like that and modeling that and then saying, okay, that wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. All done. Let's go. What's next? And moving on with life. So those are all things that we can do to model for our kids.
I'll tell you, Jane, one of the worst parts of modeling at our house right now is that our 4-year-old, somebody at her school is doing something really right. I don't know what they're reading in that class or what they're doing, but her little brother got mad the other day and she turns to him and she's such a little tater tot. And she goes, now, Henny, deep breathe in and out. Deep breathe in and out. And like the other day I got frustrated about something. She goes, Mama, you need to chill. And I was just like, my initial response is, well, you're not the boss of me. You're 4. But if my kid can model that behavior, I can too. And it is obvious how much she's looking for that modeling of how to deal with these things. She's picking it up at school that fast. She's picking it up from us too.
Yeah. And it's amazing how young they are that they've got these skills. And that's a huge one. Stopping, breathing, shifting back into neutral is huge. Good for her.
Well, and it's that much of a push that if she can be that self-controlled, maybe the rest of us could be too. I'm not really ready to let the 4-year-old be the Zen one in the family, especially this 4-year-old. The more we can put out there that it's normal to have really shitty days and to yell and to be angry and to apologize and to move on from it. We had a really rough morning this morning, and I actually messaged Arlene to ask her to remind me that anything negative I said about my husband could be edited out before he hears it. Because it was not a good morning. But just to remember that, at least for us, the family is the most important part of this. And doing what we need to do to keep that healthy is the priority.
Well, that's the nice thing about everything we do. It's under the umbrella of what we call positive discipline, right? And it's about being assertive and having boundaries, but it's about keeping that relationship intact foremost. And that's what it comes back to. You can fix everything else as long as that relationship stays intact, right? So do the work there, do the repair, do the rewind and the redos and the repairs in there, because that it always comes back to the relationship. So, and like you say, some days things go much better than others. On the days that they don't, just let them know this has not been a good day. We got to work on this to fix that relationship, but we're still there for each other and we got this. We'll figure it out.
I think maybe too, it's more frustrating to deal, at least for me, with the kid who says they can't do something when normally they're that kid that will just keep trying, because the girl child is very much my kid, and she's persistent. And like this morning it was, I can't. And I just, if we want to talk about something that'll put me on edge, it's the whiny I can't. Just I can feel myself tensing up. Just thinking
it triggers
about
us, and then all of a sudden it's not about the child anymore. It's about us and what we've triggered inside of us. But you're right. Behavior is always, that's a discussion for another podcast, all about behavior, but behavior is communication. What is she telling you when she does that? She's overwhelmed. She's stressed out. Okay, if I understand that, this is that rethinking piece, right? We catch that annoyance. What am I telling myself? Oh, this little brat. How do we rechange that? Oh, her behavior is telling me she's overwhelmed, that she's not coping. What do I need to do so we can have the outcome we want? All back to that thoughts and actions piece.
There are lots of days I just want Jane on my shoulder being my little parenting coach.
I love it when people say that.
Jane on one side and
well, if you came and lived in my house with me, you might change that thought. So, I mean, you see my professional persona here.
I feel like that's so true too, Jane, is that generally I don't, make a point of telling people how often I yell or, get frustrated or whatever. And so I've had people come up and be like, oh, you're so calm with your kids. And I'm like, do you know me? Like, did you see me for 3 minutes on the sidewalk? Because, oh, cool. I kept it together for 3 minutes and now it's a shit show around here, but you just apologize and try to do better and keep going. And
how awesome is it for your kids and the people around you to know that you are somebody who understands that when they lose their crap, that you know what that's about, and that just to keep breathing, and that we'll clean the slate, by a redo, and we'll try it again another day. But for now, we're just going to take a break.
The older I get, the more I realize that anybody who acts like they know what's going on is full of it or delusional or both. Because, I always assumed that there would be some age where you would know what was happening. And I thought maybe it would be like 25. And then I thought maybe it would be 30. And now I'm 40 and I have less of an idea than I ever did. And I'm looking around at the people who seem like they do know what's going on. And I just doesn't statistically make sense because everyone I really know, nobody has any idea what's happening. So we're all just doing our best and hoping it's enough.
Well, and you guys are making a difference here, right? I mean, first of all, I love the name of this podcast, right? Barnyard Language. It just, on so many levels, it's just so right. And good for you for speaking up because, I mean, we are in a rural community out here, and there are many, many women who have come to my groups looking for some support, who are farm people, and who are just dealing with all of these things, thinking that they're the only ones not being able to do it.
I know too, for us, one of our big pushes was wanting to get more dads involved too, because as the mom who's stuck in the house with the kids who need to go to bed and the dishes that are dirty and the laundry needs done. And my husband's just out there, I don't know what he's doing, messing with something, for 15 minutes, which is now 3 hours ago. And it's so hard to how much of our kids' lives they're missing out on, because when they're in a tractor, they're not doing bedtime. And when they're at work making money so we can keep farming, like for us, he wasn't at Meet the Teacher night and he's not at gymnastics. And, because there's cows that need fed and
well, then we expect them to have the skills that we have as well, right? Because they're your kids too, and yet they haven't had the time, and the practice to hone those skills.
That was such a big one for me to learn when the kids were babies. Arlene and I are in the same online parenting group, and I remember somebody saying, it's really unfair to expect the less present parent to be as good at things when one of us is doing it 23 hours a day. And one of us is doing it an hour a day. Of course I know where the kids' socks are. I put them away, but I magically expect him to just know these things, especially when I've changed to the system 8 times and now he doesn't know where they are.
Your soil has a unique story. At Decisive Farming by TELUS Agriculture, we want to explore that story together. Let's optimize your fertilizer costs and replenish your soil by tailoring nutrient plans to your field's needs. If soil is not replenished with nutrients, crop yield potential will deteriorate over time. Are you ready to see the bigger picture? Visit decisivefarming.com.
So, Jane, one question, I like to put some goofy questions in the interview too, because that's who I am. Handle everything through humor, inappropriate or not, whatever. What fair contest could you dominate? A real contest, a made up one, whatever. Like, what could you really be competitive in?
Well, I will let you know that in the ladies' shoe toss and in the nail hammering, I am the queen in our area. So just to put that right out forward in front.
So Jane, you already mentioned one website that you thought was a good resource for parents. Do you have any other additional resources you want to share with us that we can either put in the show notes or you can mention here?
So our website, if you have questions and actually want to talk to one of our staff, and we all talk like I do, everybody loves to talk in there, is crowlanark.com. So crow like the bird, which stands for Children's Resources on Wheels, Lanark, which is our county here in Ontario.com. And on there, we offer all sorts of parenting workshops, including the one we talked about, Bounce Back and Thrive. And so things are available there. Everything we do is free. Re-row is another one. Another one is called Positive Discipline in Everyday Parenting. And it goes by the letters. So PD, D as in dog, E as in egg, P, positive discipline in everyday parenting. And if you Google those things, or even if you just Google resiliency, you'll get all sorts of free stuff that talk about the main resiliency skills and how to access them. There's lots of print-off sheets if you have young children on how to help them become more resilient as well. But there's just a ton of information on the web out there. And like I said, you don't actually have to go to something specific. Just put in parenting, resiliency, and you'll have your choice of a lot of things. And if you don't know where to go, like I said, find us at crowlanark.com. I also have a Facebook page called Crow Parent Education. So again, crow like the bird, parent education. And you'll see all sorts of tips and just some general pick-me-ups that are posted every day, along with some resources. And you can message me there on Facebook with any questions you have. And one of the things that we do as an organization early on is that, we're one-stop shopping. We may not have all the answers, but we'll refer you on to the people that do. So, give us a shout, or even if you just enjoyed this, like I said, subscribe to these two here and, get some joy out of your day from their podcast here. And, let us know that you heard it on Facebook, and we'll connect with you if you have any questions.
There's also some videos of you that I've seen.
So we do have our own YouTube channel. We were just joking about this before we started recording. And it is Children's Resources on Wheels, which is, again, what CROW stands for. And there are some little 5 and 10 minute parenting videos on there that give you all sorts of information that are extremely helpful. Some on resiliency, some on discipline, engaging cooperation, all sorts of things. There's also some little videos on there that give you some songs and activities to do with your kids. Things like Play-Doh. I think we have about 6 up with Play-Doh, using Play-Doh as a teaching tool. So if you've got young kids, certainly check those out.
All right, so Jane, feel free to join us for our next segment here, my personal favorite. I know I had something for it today too, and hopefully while Arlene's talking about it, I'll remember what it was. Our next segment, and I think this is the first time we're really including it, is cussing and discussing. So anything that's gone well, gone badly, anything you have to, share with the group. So Arlene, what do you have today? Funny stories, whatever.
Funny stories are included. So my tip today, like I've been talking about, is it's show season for us. So that means white clothes, and they're not the easiest to find. So what I've done over the years is I have a big Rubbermaid container, and anytime I find white pants specifically, but white shirts as well, they go in the box. And so if there's hand-me-downs from other farm families, or if I happen to find white pants on sale somewhere, they go in the box. And then hopefully when show season actually comes around, as you know, kids are constantly growing, there might actually be something that will fit them in the box. And I've also discovered, depending on the size of your kids, we have some who are in the shorter leg, but maybe larger waistband category, that women's capris actually work quite well for white pants, or I mean, any kind of pants, I suppose, because you can expand the waistline, but the length is more of a kid's pant size. And plus that you can also find some wide legs, which is usually what you need for fitting over work boots or cowboy boots for the show ring. So that's my white clothes fashion tip.
So Jane, do you have any cussing or discussing to do?
This one's thrown me for a loop. This was not what I thought this category was going to be here.
What did you think this category was going to be?
So I have a funny story to tell, and I may be in trouble for this. But
no, share it.
My brother-in-law, when he was a child, was about 5 years younger than his next older sibling. And we tell the story all the time about the language actually used on the farm, the creative language that we have. And as he pops his head out the window and sees that the cows have once more broken through the fence line and are heading for greener pastures, yells to his grandmother, who's in the room, the bastards are running down the laneway. And so this being a many years ago and being a very Christian family, was quite taken aback by this, 3-year-old with this vocabulary as he's talking about what's heading down the laneway. So that's my funny story for today. And they have forever been known as that up in the barn with a special name instead of cows. So our kids do get creative, and to him, that's just what they were called. So that's my funny story for today.
You can't really blame them if that's all they've ever heard them called.
That's right.
Especially once they head through the fence.
The second time that day. So
mine, I was thinking earlier about the realities of being a farmer and what you were talking about, the horse farm, Jane. I have an online cleaning group that I really like because it's nice to be able to hive mind from 30,000 people how to clean things. But we have a whole, a big Rubbermaid tote of sheep supplies. We raise sheep and cattle. So we have a big Rubbermaid tote of veterinary supplies because they can't stay outside. They'll freeze, they get too hot, whatever. So I've got the refrigerator organization people who don't understand that the top shelf in the door is for vaccines.
Exactly.
Like, I can't put my snacks or whatever. That's where the vaccines live. You don't mess with that. And then the other day, the tote sits generally on top of the freezer next to the washing machine, and the washing machine went berserk and knocked the tote off. And I ended up with a full gallon of OB lube on the linoleum floor. And I almost asked in the cleaning group, and then I was like, I'm not ready to put this out on a group of 30,000 people about why I have a gallon of lube, because there's no way I'm going to explain it enough to make this work.
And then you won't end up with any cleaning tips. It'll just be people curious about the lube.
Yeah. Like, don't judge me, whatever. And it turns out that, so we're, of course, out of floor dry, which would be my normal. And so I used clumping cat litter, which I've used in place of floor dry before, but somehow the magic of OB lube and clumping cat litter on linoleum means that I then had clumping cat litter glued to the floor. And of course it's in the entryway. So it's like, this just isn't a normal problem.
Now, to be honest, from a sensory perspective in the early years, as long as that clumping cat litter was free, fresh from the box, and the lube was all clean, what a great sensory material for kids to play in. Just gotta say.
We should have Jane come visit my kids, because you and the girl child would hit it off. Oh my God. You would have a lot of fun.
Lots of sensory experiences.
Oh, that kid. But talking about things that are normal in farm families that aren't in other places, my favorite picture of my mom with one of my babies is when the boy child was maybe 2 weeks old. I mean, he was a little tiny tater, and we had an orphan lamb, and I came into the house and my mom was sitting on the edge of the bathtub holding my son, bottle feeding him with one hand, bottle feeding the lamb with the other hand. And I'm like, this is not normal, but it sure shows what our life is like. And there's nothing I would rather have my kids growing up with, even when it is a full gallon of lube on the floor. There's just nothing better.
So Katie and I want to thank you so much, Jane, for being with us today and for sharing all of your knowledge and expertise. And we want to thank our listeners for joining us again. We appreciate all the support that we've received so far in our podcasting journey. We'd appreciate it if you're listening, if you would like, rate, and subscribe to the podcast, because this helps other people find us. And a positive review would also be fabulous. We would also be so grateful if you would tell another farming friend to listen to the podcast, because those personal recommendations make the most difference.
Also, we will share links for all of the resources that Jane has provided today on our social media, and we'd love to hear from you. So whether you have someone you'd like to hear on our show, a product recommendation, a product non-recommendation, a potential sponsor, whatever, reach out to us on social media or at barnyardlanguage@gmail.com. If you'd like to contribute a funny story, a recent success you've had on your farm, or anything else that you'd like to hear in the cussing and discussing part of our podcast, you can record an audio file and send it our way, or write us an email and we will share it for you.
We've also started a private Facebook group, and we want you to join us and the rest of the community there. So search for Barnyard Language and put in a request to join. This is a place where you can ask questions, give and receive support and advice, and just get to know some other people who are living the farm family life.
You can find us on Instagram, TikTok, and Patreon at Barnyard Language, and on Twitter at Barnyard Pod. Patreon is a site where you can financially support the work we're doing, buy us some coffee, help Arlene get some more stain removers for all those white pants. And we would appreciate it if you are able to support us. Until next time, may your washing machine keep working and your OB lube not spill out on the floor.
Hey everyone, I hope you enjoyed this week's from the members of the Positively Farming Media Podcast Network. If you would like to learn more about the network as well as the podcast mastermind, you can head on over to positivelyfarmingmedia.com to learn more and to join us. If you are a podcaster in the food and agriculture space, we welcome you to our table. Or if you're thinking about starting your own podcast, we have a seat for you too. So head on over to positivelyfarmingmedia.com to learn more. We will see you back here next week with another special episode from the Positively Farming Media Podcast Network. Thanks for listening to the Rural Woman Podcast, a proud member of the Positively Farming Media Podcast Network. The Rural Woman Podcast is more than just a podcast. We are a community. A huge thank you to the Rural Woman Podcast team, audio editor Max Hofer, and admin support from Kim & Co. Online. A special thanks to our Patreon executive producers, Sarah Riedner from Happiness by the Acre and Carrie Munven from Laystone Farms. To learn how you can become a Patreon executive producer or other ways to financially support the show, head on over to wildrosefarmer.com to learn more. Be sure to hit the follow or subscribe button wherever you listen to the podcast to get the latest episodes directly on your playlist. And if you are loving the show, please be sure to leave a rating and review on Apple Podcast or any other platform that accepts ratings and reviews. You can connect with us on social media at The Rural Woman Podcast and with me at Wild Rose Farmer. One of the best ways you can support the show is by sharing it. Send this episode to a friend or share on your social media. Let's strengthen and amplify the voices of women in agriculture together. Until next time, my friend, keep sharing your story.